Dangerously Close.
My guest today is Holly Patterson. Holly Patterson has a background in national security and is a former member of the intelligence community. She holds a Bachelor of Politics and International Relations. She has suffered from depression and suicidal ideation her whole life, and since 2017, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Holly is also autistic and has ADHD. After a suicide attempt in 2018, Holly traveled to South America seeking alternative treatment at a traditional shamanic plant medicine retreat in Peru. Holly's experiences were profound and life-changing. After her ceremonies, her nightmares had lessened significantly, suicidal ideation had disappeared, and she no longer felt scared and anxious. After returning from Peru, Holly discovered art therapy. She is now an enthusiastic fluid artist and psychedelic therapy advocate, helping veterans and first responders access psychedelic therapy overseas and teaching the value of art therapy. What's up, Holly?
Hey, thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm really glad that I got through reading your introduction in a smooth way. It doesn't always go that well for me.
It's a bit long.
I was going to say, so I know that dealing with national security and like intelligence, you probably can't share a lot of details about your work, but
Yeah.
can you share just a general idea of the kind of things you dealt with at your job?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, working in the intelligence community does definitely mean that you're very limited with what you can say. I worked drug importation cases. I worked people smuggling cases, child pornography and child abuse cases, which were the main gripe for me, I guess, in terms of being very confronted by what I saw. A lot of organized crime, just the sort of usual.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
the usual sort of transnational crime that you deal
okay.
with.
Yeah. And you're Australian.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. If you couldn't tell from her accent, I'll just okay. I just wanted to ask just because I know that like as you know when I was reading just your introduction, like you maybe had already had some depression and some things going in, but what would you say that like your job was kind of a catalyst for maybe things getting a lot more extreme or difficult?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I didn't have PTSD or complex PTSD before I started that role. I have always struggled a bit with mental health. I've suffered depression and suicidal ideation a lot in my life. I think I first went on antidepressants when I was about 13 or so, which were obviously no good for me, and no good for a lot of people that age, I believe. But yeah, I mean, I had a bit of an abusive relationship before my job either way, so that obviously didn't help as well. But majority of my trauma and stuff comes from my role there, particularly the child abuse materials that I dealt with. That's sort of really stuck with me, unfortunately. In that manifests in different ways, whether it's nightmares or flashbacks or whatever it might be. But yeah, I mean, I saw a lot of things in that job that were obviously wrong morally, but it wasn't just the content that I saw, it was some of the processes and procedures and the way things are done in the intelligence community that also just didn't mesh well with me. A lot of it just didn't sit well with me internally. And I mean, I dedicated my life to that. I went through my studies with politics and international relations. I majored in national security, and I devoted my life to that space, and I guess moving into that real world of it after studying and doing all the work that I'd done, it was there's a way it should be and there's the way that it is. So the reality of it's very different. People seem to think that Intel's this sexy James Bond job, and
Yeah.
it's very much not. It's very much not. There's a lot of paperwork.
I literally do, just to your point right there, when I think of an intelligence job, uh James Bond is not what comes to mind, but it's the Bourne movies, like Jason Bourne
Yeah.
and the Bourne Identity. And I always think of like when they're after him, and they set up the room, and everyone's at a computer, and and they've got like cameras, they're checking every CCTV camera in every town, and then the guy is like, oh my god, that's Jason Bourne. And
Yeah.
that's has and I know that Hollywood always makes jobs seem like way more kind of flashy than the reality of it. Can I ask you, just like, because a lot of what you just said, and I don't have a ton of understanding of what it means, like what complex post-traumatic stress disorder means, but in a way, like kind of what you were explaining there, it's not something that's caused necessarily by one major event, but by a series of events. Is that a good
Correct.
way to put it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's complex PTSD is usually associated with childhood trauma, repetitive childhood trauma, generally sexual childhood trauma. I mean, it's something that can be reoccurring and more than just the one single event. I know people who've been in car accidents and from that one event have extreme PTSD, and that's completely understandable. But the complex side of it comes from either repetitive exposure to or vicarious trauma as well. So in my case, I was exposed to a lot of confronting materials over a long period of time. So
Yeah.
that's sort of, it's not an easy, when it comes to therapy as well, it's not just sitting down and talking about that one single incident. It's sitting down and attempting to talk about thousands of incidences that then, when you're talking about that and there's so many of them, it just gets too overwhelming, and it's quite difficult to work through. So yeah, it's generally repetitive trauma or vicarious exposure to something. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I think I understand it a little bit better now. And that's the reason why you add complex. Is that
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
is that different than like maybe what a lot of veterans might have? Like a soldier might have experienced just one particularly bad experience in combat that was, and so that's a different type of PTSD. I mean, I don't want to sound so completely ignorant, but also
No, that's okay. Yeah, yeah, essentially. I mean, veterans and first responders, I mean, it comes down to their psychiatrist in terms of their diagnosis, essentially, which is kind of the weird thing. But I mean, you look at an ambulance driver who rocks up to a car accident with someone decapitated multiple times a week, potentially. The fireys who go and cut people out of cars, or pulling burnt bodies out of houses, and that's a repetitive thing over their careers.
yeah.
Same with soldiers, they get sent on deployment for 11 months, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, but, then they come home and they get sent back over again for another tour. And it's that sort of built up trauma without any assistance or without any debrief, I guess, in the meantime. And I think veterans have a particularly difficult time with, I guess it goes across first responders as well. Anyone in that space where if they speak up about their mental health or the issues that they're facing with their mental health because of their job, that can mean getting fired. That can mean losing their job, being deemed mentally unfit for their position anymore. So I guess you can see why a lot of people wouldn't speak out about it, with potentially losing their job. And for a lot of people, especially in the military, that's a sense of their identity that gets taken away as well. So it can be a very traumatic it can be very traumatic having severe trauma.
Yeah.
The flow-on
Yeah.
effects just sort of ripple out further and further, and it affects everyone in your life. And yeah.
And I guess too, like you're meant to compartmentalize in a lot of these jobs we're talking about. And it's a culture of that too, where they're like, well, you lock that away in a certain part of your brain, and then you've got your work self, and then you've got the really, really dark side of work, and then maybe the brighter sides of work, and then you got your family and your leisure time and all that stuff. But the thing is, brains don't literally have compartments. And so
Exactly.
that's going to affect you, and it's going to seep into all facets of your life, which I think maybe we'll get into a little bit later too, when we start talking more about therapies and understanding that we are people as a whole. And so your worst memory or your worst traumatic experience, it's something you might carry with you, but there are ways to work through it and work with it, and also maybe to gain a higher understanding. That's a lot of what I believe with psychedelic therapy and stuff too, is looking at the world through a brand new perspective. I actually wanted to ask before we jump all the way to, the story
Psychedelic
and Peru
therapy.
and all that stuff. I just feel like I should ask, what were some of the traditional treatments for like depression and PTSD that you had tried before you tried alternative treatment and plant therapy?
Sure. Oh wow, I feel like I tried everything. I tried a range of antidepressants. I tried a range of anti-anxieties. I even got put on antipsychotics at one stage, which were not good for me in any way. I wasn't in psychosis. They got prescribed to me mainly to help me sleep. I remember going to my psychiatrist one day of day 5 of no sleep. My nightmares got so bad I was absolutely terrified, like fucking terrified to go to sleep.
Yeah.
And I would just try and stay awake as long as I could just to avoid that and hope that when I finally crashed, I would be that exhausted that I wouldn't have nightmares. And I remember going to see my psychiatrist on day 5 of no sleep, and I was, twitching a bit and sort of paranoid, seeing shadows move and stuff, from just a sleep deprivation. And he's a very good psychiatrist. He said to me, "What day are you on? What day of no sleep are you on here?" And I was like, "This is why I'm paying you the big bucks."
Yeah.
So he ended up giving me antipsychotics to sort of knock me out and just give me that break. But they were no help in terms of long term treatment or anything. It was a very sort of snap of the moment decision. And I mean, I'm grateful for him for doing that at the same time, as much as I wouldn't like to take them again.
You got to
I
sleep.
am grateful. Yeah, yeah, I managed to finally, and I mean, it's not really sleep when you're just knocked out, your brain's not doing all the processing that it usually does when you're having a good night's sleep. So it just kind of like shuts down entirely overnight. So you kind of wake up after 16 hours just feeling groggy and absolutely awful. And then you
Is an
realize where you are and what you're doing, and it's all bad again.
is an antipsychotic, is that a type of sedative? Is that why it puts you to sleep?
I'm not sure if it's exactly a type of sedative. I mean, I've heard of people who are in psychosis being prescribed an extreme high dose of the medication that I had. I had only 25 milligrams of the antipsychotic, and that was enough to knock me out. I've heard of people who are in psychosis having 800 milligrams of that in the morning just to function. So, I mean, I don't think it's a sedative as such, but it seems to work as a sedative for people maybe who aren't in psychosis. I'm not 100% sure on that, but that's sort of just what I can gather from. I also tried a range of therapies, trauma therapies. I did EDMR therapy. I did exposure therapy, which was absolutely re-traumatizing. Exposure therapy is where you sit down and you talk about your trauma in detail over and over and over again till essentially you're desensitized to it. And I mean, if not to say that someone in a car accident, has less trauma than me, but I mean, I feel it might work better for someone who has a single incident to work through as opposed to multiple incidences and ones that I really don't ever want to delve into again. I
Yeah.
understand that I have to. I've had to revisit those memories and stuff to sort of process them, but to sit there in therapy for hours, for 10 weeks at a time, talking in depth about child pornography is just not something I want to do, nor is it something that's been helpful or healing for me in any way. So, I mean, after quite a few sessions with that, I just canned it because I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. I know
And
it's helping a lot of people.
oh yeah, and that's for some people. Like yeah, different forms of talk therapy are very very extremely helpful. Like cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
I don't know much about exposure therapy, which we were just discussing, but I do know some about EMDR, and
Mm.
I know that there's more than one way to do it. I know that they can do it with lights and they can do it with tactile. So I don't know which one you experienced. There's one I know
I
where
just
you
had a ruler.
a
So I
ruler.
just had my
Okay.
psychologist literally just held up like a ruler and was like, just watch this and let's talk about your trauma. And I was
Okay.
like,
Well, I guess
this
anything
sounds,
works.
yeah, yeah, I guess so. But it's rather distracting, and I guess that's kind of the point. But I mean, I've got ADHD, so I don't need any more distractions than I. You know?
I
I see a light flash and I'm completely off anyway, you know. So I mean, a ruler in front of me, it's distracting. It's very difficult. It's quite difficult, but again, it's worked brilliantly for some people, and it's an amazing therapy. When you know when I first heard about it, I was like, how does that work, you know? And I'm not going to question it because how do psychedelics work, you know, how do
yeah,
they the
yeah.
mystical side of it, you know, there is something that I'm never going to delve into or question too much, but
Well,
yeah.
what little understanding I have of EMDR is I do not remember the name of the person who invented it, but I believe what I think what she had done was she was walking while
Walking
going
a dog.
yeah, while going over some kind of very difficult psychological issue and focusing on the left right steps. And because of
Yeah.
that distraction, it created a new pathway to looking into this old problem in a brand new way and creating a new perspective, which is like what we're here to talk about. So I
Yeah.
so yeah, like we're not throwing any shade on any of these other forms of
Not at
therapy.
all.
It's what works for who, and like you said with the exposure
Definitely.
therapy, that doesn't sound fun at all, but I imagine that I mean I wouldn't have heard of it if it hasn't worked for some people.
Yeah. I
And
mean, it's sort of the gold standard for treatment for PTSD, exposure therapy. It's sort of the best that we've got at the moment, you know, besides psychedelics. And I mean, I know a few Afghan veterans who have come a long way with exposure therapy. So I mean, it definitely works for some people, but again, that's just sort of the whole mindset and the issue with the whole mindset around PTSD and trauma in itself, that we can have a couple of therapies that are just going to work, you know, and it's like this cookie cutter approach. It needs to be individualized, because what works for some person might not work for another person. And even if they have the exact same sort of traumas, again, they might not respond to that therapy in the same way. So it's, you just need more options, essentially. It's the options that people need. Yeah.
I kind of guess I maybe like kind of skipped over a slightly crucial part, but it was did you have a kind of I don't know if it was a moment or just maybe over a period of time did you realize that your mental health was being affected by your job, and did you decide to leave, or how did that kind of
Yeah.
shake out?
Yeah. I left that job with quite a bad way. My nightmares had started. I was getting very depressed. I was working very long hours. I was often in the office alone, late at night. I would be working through, you know, these cases that were really confronting. And I guess the Intel space is quite a complex space to work in, that the support in that space at work is not as it's not ideal in my eyes. I mean, I worked alongside, you know, state policing's Intel branches on some of these cases, and you know, come 5 p.m., the guys in the police would be like, all right, well, we're going to go play our hour of touch football that we're going to go play, because that's what we do at the end of the day when we're dealing with content like this all day. We have to have a debrief, a fun moment before we go home, so we don't take all this home with us.
Yeah.
And I mean, we didn't have that. You know, we're an Intel. There's there's no questions around that. Even if there are questions around support for people in Intel's not going to be like, this is what we do. You know, that's a very closed door, very sort of closed off space to work. And that sort of made me feel even more isolated. Like, you guys are all going to go play touch football, and it's great. And I'm stoked that you guys get to do that after work. But I'm going to sit here for another few hours on my own, just going through this work because I have to.
I hate to interrupt you with an idiotic question, but I have to know, in Australia, do you mean when you say football, do you mean what I think you mean, like what I mean by football, or do
No.
because you're saying touch football, which like as a kid we had a game called two hand touch, which is football where there's no tackle.
Okay. Yeah,
But
pretty much. Yeah. It's like
okay,
rugby
but
league,
are you guys playing with
not
I guess
soccer.
what I'm asking, are you playing with a soccer ball? Or are you actually playing with
No,
a
not
football?
soccer.
Okay.
Not soccer. No, we call soccer here too.
Okay, I didn't know that. Okay, I was unaware of like how, because everyone in Europe says football, and
Football.
and
Yeah.
everyone in South America says football, and just
Yeah.
I didn't know like where you guys were at with that. So I know that was a really silly thing to break in, but I wasn't not going to be able to get much further without, because it was gonna drive me nuts not knowing what you meant by football.
I think we've got too many different types of football here for soccer to be included as football. So we have enough footballs to decipher between. So no, soccer is soccer here, thankfully for us.
Okay.
Or else that would
Okay.
get super. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And yes, and you guys are like a big rugby nation too, right? Is that true?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Plus AFL, Australian Football League is I think the most. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's the most popular of the footballs here in Australia. It's a pretty rough game, but all football is, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, that was a tangent that I just totally took you on for while you were in the middle of saying something very important. You're saying so like the cops you're working with, they get to go out, you know, they're working it out also like in a team sport, so that's got to help. And it's a rough game, that's got to help, you know, get it out. But like for, you know, your job position, you're still sitting in front of a computer, still looking at, you know, I just assume pretty disturbing information and images.
Yeah. I mean, it's not ideal for anyone to be in that situation. You know, I didn't request to work on cases like that. You know, in the police force, you have to request to work in a team like that. You have to request it, then you go through rigorous psychological testing to make sure that you're going to be able to, you know, you don't have childhood trauma, or you're going to be able to work in that space effectively. And they have, you know, weekly debriefs. They've got all these things in place that the person in that job knows what they're in there for. They know what they're doing. They've signed up for it, you know, whereas I was working on just a range of here and there cases. And when things came across my desk that, I wasn't prepared for, it was, it's confronting, you know, it's really confronting. And, you know, I don't have kids, but I've got young nieces, and, you know, it just hits a bit harder it just hits home a bit harder then. Just thinking what if, which is not something I ever want to think about, but, you know, you can't help but think that when you see how unfortunately common it is, not just in Australia, but overseas, especially overseas. It's outrageously common. And, you know, in particular, the way that we handle it here, you know, convicted child sex abuse, it's a very lenient punishment. And that's a big part of how, you know, it's not traumatizing knowing that they get low sentences, but it's traumatizing knowing that you can't do more. And that you can't do more for, you know, the trauma's already happened to the kids, whatever it might be. It's just knowing that you've done your best, and seeing them, you know, potentially get out with a 6-month sentence and on parole in 4 months. It makes you kind of feel like, why do we bother? And why aren't we taking this more seriously? And, you know, in this country right now, especially in New South Wales, in a state in Australia here, you can get sentenced maximum up to 25 years for getting caught with magic mushrooms.
Are you
and you
serious?
look at
God,
it's all state based, so every state has a different you know, a different view on drugs, and their drug policies are all different. However, they upped it recently, you know, a couple of years ago. New South Wales increased the punishment for it. And, you know, I've just come out of working in the prison space as well, and seeing the sentencing around child pornography or pedophilia, however you want to put it. The sentencing around that, in comparison to things like having magic mushrooms or having a second offense for speeding, you know, is just, it blows my mind. It's absolutely outrageous, really.
It's egregious. It's upside down.
Hold up. It's time for an announcement. You know those memes that say things like, "Don't talk to me until I've had my coffee"? Those are really funny. The problem is, if I drink too much coffee, it gives me a little anxiety, and I might even start getting paranoid and think that people are recording my conversations and putting them on the internet. Anyone could listen to them on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. That's why I've been drinking a shot of Magic Mind in the morning instead of a pot of coffee. The great thing about Magic Mind is that it's a little green shot that helps give you energy and focus to have a productive day with all natural ingredients like matcha. Matcha contains way less caffeine than coffee, and also contains additional compounds called catechins that extend the benefits of caffeine by slowing your body's ability to absorb it, as well as a compound called L-theanine that reduces stress. It's got ashwagandha, an adaptogen that reduces stress and anxiety. Lion's mane mushrooms, yet another nootropic and adaptogen. It reduces anxiety and inflammation while also supporting cognition by preventing neural degeneration and stimulating neural regeneration. Plus, a ton of other cool nootropic mushrooms that I can't easily pronounce, but you could easily read in the ingredient list by going to magicmind.co/my views are my own, and then see for yourself how easy it is to pronounce the names of these plants and mushrooms, smarty pants, and then use promo code My Views Are My Own for up to 56% off your first order. Once again, that's magicmind.co/My Views Are My Own, promo code My Views. And now back to the interview.
For me, and I've never seen any like real. I'm a sensitive person. I'll admit that, and like I feel things kind of like a little too much. So even when I'm just watching a movie that's complete make believe, and there's certain stuff in it, I get infuriated at completely made up at actors that are just so I admit that I don't have a true understanding of what your job would have been like dealing with real life stuff that's disturbing and painful to look at and all this stuff. But moving forward, I obviously I'm doing my best to have the empathy to. It's like, I guess what I'm saying is I get it and I don't.
Yeah.
But
no, it's hard. I understand. Yeah.
After you left, but I guess quitting that job was not like an immediate alleviation, right? Because
no.
once you've kind of opened the Pandora's box of PTSD, it's open, and that's just kind of how it is. Am I right?
Yeah. I mean, you don't just leave the job and you're fine. If that was the case, our veterans would be very healthy mentally.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I mean, I left the job and I sort of just spiraled down into this depth of depression and just suicidal ideation. I just locked myself away at home on my own, and I was single at the time, and I just had my blinds shut at home. I was too scared to leave the house. I wasn't sleeping. I was depressed. I was suicidal. I was having flashbacks in public, which made me really isolate myself more at home. I got really scared and kind of really embarrassed to leave the house with the potential of what if I have a flashback, And I mean, my triggers I learnt about in public.
Yeah.
Which were hard. And the triggers themselves are not something I could avoid either. It was it's a particular pitch or a tone of a child screaming or crying. It's not all kids screaming and crying. It's just I can't explain it. I'll hear a pitch or a tone. I remember I was grocery shopping one day, and a little probably 3-year-old kid came up behind me and just screamed at the top of his lungs. And it immediately sent me into a flashback, and I turned around, I looked at him, and I looked at his mum, who was like kind of horrified that he'd done that, but I was in this flashback, and I screamed at her, and I was like, what are you doing to him, and I dropped my basket and I ran out, and I just sat in my car crying and crying and crying, and I was shaking and I couldn't do anything. I was just so horrified at what had happened and what I felt that I was back in that moment. And God, the worst part was she had parked her car directly next to mine in the car park,
of course.
which I didn't know, of course. And I was sitting there just like shaking and crying. And I mean, I'm really thankful that she didn't take it personally, and she could see that there was clearly something wrong with the situation when I ran out. Because she came up to my window and she knocked on the window, and I put my window down. She just asked, "Are you okay?" And that was a really comforting kind of moment for me as well. And I just started apologizing like crazy, but I couldn't even really explain myself. I said, I'm just so sorry that happened. There was nothing else I could say. I couldn't explain what had happened. Yeah. So, I mean, I was having flashbacks, which I couldn't control. And, a child screaming can happen anywhere in public. It can it can happen absolutely anywhere. So I got really scared to leave the house and to yell at someone accidentally again, or to run out crying, or to embarrass. I felt embarrassed and rather ashamed about it all, because you do go through that mentality of, I'm weak, I should have been able to handle this better. I don't feel that now, of course. That's taken a while to work through, but I mean, it's hard. You're like, I've been trained for this, I've worked this, and like now I can't do this anymore. I can't do what I feel I was put on this earth to do. And
Yeah.
I mean, that brings a whole nother range of identity sort of crisis moments, that you're like, who am I now? I identified, my work was who I was, and I dedicated my life to studying that, and I volunteered on a national security think tank for 4 years before my role, and I put so much into that. It's like, and I see the dangers now of associating your job and everything that you do too much with who you are, because when that was gone, I was not only dealing with complex trauma and the symptomology of that, but I was dealing with this, like, who am I? Like, what am I doing? What has happened? How have I gotten here? And why can't I do what I used to be able to do? So it's just this shame spiral that continues down further and further. And it affects all these other parts of your life that you then judge yourself on. And, you feel like you should be able to get through grocery shopping. I should
Yeah.
be able to go to the shops and not yell at some woman and a kid.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, it got very bad. In 2018, yeah, I attempted suicide. Those antipsychotics that I had been given, I stashed a massive amount of them into me, and I mean, I'm not sure 100% what my intentions were with that. But my partner at the time, my boyfriend at the time, noticed that I was sort of slurring and not really coherent, so he took me to hospital, and yeah, I sort of remember just lying in bed in the hospital with these psychiatrists and crisis teams and stuff coming over, and it was just like, I can't keep doing this. I can't live like this. This is no way to live. I have no quality of life, and look at where I am now. I'd moved cities by then. I moved to Sydney from Canberra in the Australian Capital Territory. I moved 3.5 hours into Sydney, and I guess kind of running away from my old space, my old life, my old job. And I mean, it didn't help, of course.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
it was
you can't run
kind
away
of
from yourself.
refreshing. Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I mean, I was in Sydney all alone, I was nowhere near family or anything. And I mean, I chose to do that, and it was good for me in a sense at the time. But yeah, things got pretty dark when I was there, for sure.
is around this time, is this when you had first heard about ceremonies
Oh,
in Peru, or were you already aware of this, or is this kind of like, was it new
yeah.
information to you? Oh, you were already
I
aware.
mean, yeah, I've been doing some research. I mean, after, a lot of failed therapies and sort of getting nowhere, I started looking into, yeah, alternative treatment. And I mean, I'm just lucky that I stumbled upon ayahuasca. And Graham Hancock was particularly influential with his videos, particularly around ayahuasca and what to expect and that sort of stuff. And I remember lying in the hospital bed after my suicide attempt, just lying there and looking off to the wall, staring, thinking like, this is your last option. You've got one last chance at this, and you need to go to Peru and you need to try ayahuasca. And if that doesn't work, then yeah, I'll just disappear into the jungle and not come back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, so I mean, I'd researched it, and that's sort of when I made the decision that, I think it was like a month later, I was on a plane to Peru on my own. I was just like, I need to fucking do this, get the fuck out of here, and just get on a plane and just go. And it was hard, I was in a really bad space in that moment. A lot of people sort of rock up to these places in Peru just like disheveled and broken.
yeah.
So I think I cried on the whole plane from Sydney to Chile, just like, what am I doing? And I've got nothing. And if this doesn't work, there was all these just anxiety-fueled thoughts going through my head. And
So did you just
I mean,
you just made arrangements and you just left on your own on a plane to
yeah,
South
I mean,
America?
Yeah, I did a lot of research into, a safe space. I spoke to a few people. I actually had a cousin in America who had been over to Peru to drink ayahuasca probably, I think it was like 6 months before I went. So I mean, I was able to get in contact with him and have a chat with him about it, which was super helpful. But yeah, I really looked around at different retreats, and I picked one that I felt was reputable and appropriate for me at the time, and it was absolutely amazing. It was everything I needed. It was a loving, supporting environment, and yeah, I mean, it was the best decision I've ever made in my life.
I know that it's practically impossible to describe an ayahuasca experience to, especially to people that have never had such an, like I personally, I've had mushroom experiences and LSD experiences, and I know, these are all in the same realm of, but
Sure.
can you share just like, I mean, how you remember it, like to the best of how you remember it, like what was your experience when you went through the ceremony?
Yeah, yeah. It's a very sacred, ceremonial, traditional thing, it's a really beautiful shamanic tradition. And I think I was most taken aback by just the tradition around it. I guess living in Australia, our history goes back, or, our white history goes back not long. And so, having mystical traditions and ceremonial things, it's just not been in my realm. I've not been exposed to things like this. Um, I mean, it's a very daunting process, I guess it can be. You enter the Maloka, the big room that you're in, and there's a couple of shamans there sitting there. It's a very quiet, very respected space. You'll sit in meditation for sometimes half an hour. You can sit there doing breath work. You can sleep if you want. It's up to you, however you want to prepare mentally for it. I usually sit there and meditate and sort of speak to myself about my intention, what intention I'm setting for ceremony. And I mean, then you'll be given your cup of ayahuasca and you lie back, and the shamans drink ayahuasca first, and then you get yours. And about 45 minutes later, in the dark, you'll hear the shamans start to sing their ikaro, which is a beautiful, absolutely beautiful song. They each sing a unique ikaro, which is that they're healing songs. And that can really jet you off. That alone can really jet you off into another realm. um,
Yeah.
and during your ceremony, the shamans will come and work with you individually. They'll sit with you, they'll sing with you, they'll touch you, they'll do a range of smoke ceremonies. They'll blow mapacho on you. They'll spit aqua de florido onto you, which is a floral oil. And they'll be there when you're absolutely breaking down, if that's what you're going through, which is something definitely that I did. Um,
Did you feel like you were
yeah,
that you had any kind of resistance to the experience?
yeah. I mean, my first ceremony, I've done, I think, 11 ceremonies now. I've been back to Peru since my first trip. I've been back not too long ago. There was definitely resistance at the start, but that's something I'd really looked into and really researched, sort of the importance of being able to let go. And I remember sitting there in my first ceremony holding my cup of ayahuasca, just trying to set my intention, and it was just like, please just let me be able to let go. And that's sort of what my intention was, to just please guide me safely, and to let me be able to let go so that I can fully, get into this beautiful moment. And it took a while. It took a couple of ceremonies for me to be able to do that. You're definitely feeling the effects, and you're purging, you're vomiting, and the vomiting alone can be extremely healing. It's I know that sounds a bit crazy. A lot of people wouldn't like that. But I mean, my last ceremony that I had not too long ago, was that was really intense. I mean, I was vomiting for quite a while, and I guess I was, you're having these visuals at the same time, and there was a lot of dark snakes and vines and and stuff coming out of my mouth, and prickly, viney, just horrible things just coming out. And I mean, you can view that however you want to view that, but I see
Yeah.
that as some dark shit that I needed to get out.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'd purged previously in ceremonies, and it had never been like that before. I really felt like some deep dark shit was coming out, and I felt so light after that moment. The rest of that ceremony got wilder, but it's the little things that you can sort of stop and appreciate during ceremony. It's like I feel light, or I feel like my heart's opened again, and I feel love, or I feel, self-love is a big part of it, self-compassion and self-empathy, these things that I did not know how to do that before. I mean, I knew I needed to love myself, but the whole concept of developing self-love and really fostering that was something that I couldn't do. I didn't know how to do. And even just in ceremony, it's being able to sit there and just with those moments and focus on those moments of I actually feel something that I haven't felt in years.
Yeah.
I feel like my heart is exploding open to everyone and everything. And again, something that I had never experienced, but all these emotions came flooding in, these things that I had been pushing away for years in trying to just deal with my trauma, just I can't mentally deal with any more emotions right now.
Yeah.
And I'm going to block these out. And yeah, I mean, when you're able to breathe in that space and feel those things, you're like, holy shit, like this is what I've been missing out on, and I need to feel these things. I need to feel these things to be human and to feel human and to connect with myself, to be able to connect deeper with myself and work through things with myself and to support myself and have my own back during those moments. It's that's sort of some of the beautiful moments that you get from healing with psychedelics, I think, is this self-love and this ability to sit with it and appreciate everything in your life, and appreciate that you're alive and you're connected to so many things and so many people, and just things that I just couldn't see before I went there. It blows my mind still thinking about it.
And honestly, to your point you just made, like things you can't see, like when you were describing purging, and it was obviously it was probably just food that you'd had in your stomach that was very just like that's what you were throwing up. But I mean, but as you were seeing it and as you were experiencing it as being thorny snakes, and these, I don't know if it had like a dark entity kind of vibe to it, or just dark darkness and unpleasantness. But the thing is, that's what it's why it's so important to get the psychedelic therapy into further and further into a mainstream place where we can start to the more people that could experience it, the more that it can be done in hospitals and healthcare places, because the mind is ineffable, and there's no way that I can tell you that what you saw isn't what you saw, because how would I know? Because I'm on whatever plane of vision and perspective I'm particularly on right now. And when you take a very powerful psychedelic, you see, you have a brand new perspective. And I'm just curious about maybe a couple of other things maybe that you would add, some of these other experiences that a lot of people report, which is one, I don't know if did you feel like at any point, did you experience anything that was kind of like a dissolution of the ego where you kind of became?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say my last ceremony, I really experienced this. It's the whole ego death thing. I My last ceremony, it was funny. I was asked the next morning in our sharing circle, how was your ceremony last night? And all I could say was like, I'm just glad I'm not dead.
Yeah.
I can't believe I made it through that ceremony. And I'm so thankful for the facilitators, particularly one in particular. I was so in this depth of craziness, and I couldn't even, they say if you need help during ceremony, just knock on the floor and someone will come. I couldn't even do that. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know who I was. I was like, I was dying kind of. And Rachel came and sat with me, this amazing, brilliant facilitator, and she held my hand. And I remember I just mustered up the words. I'm like, please don't leave me. Like I need you here. I'm dying. So
I,
Yeah, I mean, you have these moments where you might think you're dying, or you might see whatever it is that you can interpret in that ego death, or and it can be it's absolutely fucking terrifying at the time. I'm not going to sugarcoat an ayahuasca trip because it is terrifying. It can be confronting, it can be shit scary, but the importance, I guess, is the integration afterwards, and how you can view your experience, and how you can see it in a positive way. I'm a big believer of there's no bad trips, there's just really hard ones.
yeah.
And I know that's hard for some people to wrap their head around if they've had a ceremony where they've envisioned themselves having their head cut off or being wrapped up in snakes or whatever it might be. I understand it's hard to try and put a narrative on that moment that is healing and that can help you. But it's really, that's the important side of it for me anyway, is knowing that I can sit down and I can generally pair up sort of what that might mean for me, and whether it is just a dark energy I feel is leaving me, or if it's I've relived traumas. I've relived some witnessing of child abuse materials in ceremony, and I was able to witness that from an objective perspective. I didn't have the emotional connection to that moment. It's like I was kind of hovering above it, and it allowed me to process that without having to delve super deep and get super upset about it again. So I mean, I was able to relive traumas and process them, which is something that, God, I have been dying and trying to do in therapy for how long. I also had a friend who had committed suicide not long before I went to Peru the first time, who visited me during ceremony. And I know it's hard to talk about these things without going, people think I'm crazy. And it is, you sort of learn to share only a few things from ceremony when you come back, because you need to protect that space, that healing space you're in. If you tell someone that is just going to roll their eyes at you and be like, yeah, righto, that can be damaging to your healing process. So you kind of learn to really only mention small things to a select few people. But I mean, I happily sort of talk about this now. I don't feel that, I'm sure people think I'm crazy. That's fine. I don't care. I think we're all a bit mad.
I think, like I said, like going into with the little preface of, I know that it's practically impossible to explain this.
Yeah.
The length, our words, just our verbal language is inadequate to describe what you experience. And I wanted to go to another thing you said too, just an irony about the terror aspect and how it can be terrifying. But so interestingly is that, psychedelic therapy can also be used in hospice in a lot of ways. So terminal patients, people that might have terminal cancer or some other disease, and it's just and they're very, very afraid of dying, and it's imminent. And that's what's so bad, is because they're spending their final months, maybe weeks, in this fear state, and that's just a horrible way to have to go out, is to spend every last moment in fear. And there's been so many times where, when people can have the access to it, of course, which it's sadly here in the United States, it's mostly outlawed, and obviously in Australia, as you said earlier, they have one state has a 25-year sentence for having mushrooms which grow on the ground. But I was going to say that these people, like that, just repeatedly over and over and over again, people with these terminal illnesses report, after having a very profound and powerful psychedelic experience, they have lost their fear of death. And a lot of that could be from the dissolution of the ego, realizing that there is more to just how we all consider ourselves this individual singular thing, and that we are all actually part of something much larger, and that there's even perhaps, and I'm not gonna, I don't want people to start thinking I'm crazy either, but like that there is that there's another, a non-physical world that is generally invisible to us in our day-to-day lives, but it can be seen. And like when I use the word seen, also, like I said, the English language is inadequate to describe what I mean by seeing, or you could say, or felt, or understood on some level. So
Definitely, definitely. I mean, the end of life trials that they've been doing with psilocybin have just proven to be life-changing for majority of people that have gone through them. I mean, there's nothing worse than knowing someone you love is spending their last few weeks or months in terror, you know, or feeling scared to die, or feeling disconnected from who they are, or people and those loved ones around them. This is sort of where a lot of the research has started, in that end of life space. I think that's a safe space for researchers to start in their eyes.
Yeah.
But it's also a very transformative space for them to work, because my God, look at the research outcomes from some of these. They've been absolutely mind-blowing, you know, and you know, that's pushed further on to things for eating disorders and OCD and alcoholism and all these, addiction in general, and PTSD, depression, you know, those sorts of things. But it's, yeah, I think it was like they all reported that it was one of the top three experiences in their whole lives, the most profound moment in top three in their lives. And I think for people who experience that later in life, it's kind of sucky that they experience it, you know, if they're experiencing it in this end of life phase, but at least they get to experience it, you know, and that's a massive thing. Going out feeling safe and loved, and knowing that you don't have to be scared of anything, is, I think, just what we all want.
Yeah.
It's something that we all want to be able to do, is die happy, knowing that we're connected and we're not feeling scared. And yeah.
I mean, that's what a lot of what religion is for. And that's another thing too, is so many times, I mean, I know there's an experiment that it's looked down upon. It's frowned upon by a lot of scientists. It was done by Timothy Leary, and I don't remember exactly it was called the Sunday service experiment, something like that, where he gave mushrooms to several people in a church that were doing a ceremony of some, you know, a religious Christian ceremony, and he gave placebos to several people as well, and everyone that had the mushrooms reported it as the most profound, you know, really, you know,
Wow.
in their Christian faith too, because, you know, set and setting is so, you know, I'm sure you're like, you were saying, like, the set and setting is everything. So
Yeah.
but not to go, I'm not trying to talk about Timothy Leary right now. That's not the road I want to go down. What I wanted to ask was, it is fascinating, and I think he got a little bit of a raw deal with how he was, you know. I think, well, you know, it depends on who you talk to. I think some people still really, really appreciate what he's done for the world, and some people, you know, don't. Whatever.
Yeah.
What I was gonna say was, you know, clearly for you, having this experience, and these ceremonies, and coming back, and especially coming from such a difficult place, such a dark place, and even from a place where you no longer wanted to live anymore because life had gotten that hard. Your health and well-being, you know, mental health, well-being, maybe even physical health, I don't know. Would you also say that just your life philosophies, have they been affected? And if so, like, how would you say that's occurred?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of view my life now as pre-Peru and post-Peru. Just because they are completely opposite ends of the scale in terms of who I was and what I valued, and what I really felt was important in life. And I mean, if I had never been to Peru, I would not be meditating, I would not be doing yoga, I would not be doing art therapy, I would not be doing all of these things that are just so good for me. I wouldn't have realized the vital importance of connection in not just family but in life. And there's all these little things, that all these aspects of my life that have just improved tremendously post Peru, both physical and mental health. You know, I remember being able to sleep a full night when I got back from Peru, and just waking up in the morning like super confused, because I was like, I'm used to waking up 5 times a night in sheer terror, you know, or crying or screaming, whatever it is. I'm used to waking up like that, and to wake up calmly and it be daylight outside, you know, it's not the middle of the night. That was it was confronting in itself. It was super strange. I remember just thinking, like, holy shit, am I going to be able to sleep? Like, is this
Yeah.
my new life? Like, I remember feeling overwhelmed with happiness that I had slept a full night, you know. I was like, holy shit, I can't even explain how happy that made me feel. Just the confusion of waking up after 8 hours sleep without waking up, you know, during the night, shit scared. That alone was so amazing. It was so amazing for me. Not to mention I didn't want to kill myself when I came back. I didn't feel like every day I just wanted to end things because things were too difficult. I was able to connect with my family mostly, you know, more when I got back, and that is so important for me, you know. My family have always been so super supportive of me, and you know, I ran off the rails when I was 17 a bit, and I mean, they stood by every stupid decision I made. You know, they were always there and they always made it clear that they would always be there for me. And, you know, that's a really important thing in life to have, especially from a child's age and up. I just couldn't appreciate that before I went to Peru. I was like, yeah, you're always here, ditto, whatever, you know. Yeah, like this is what we do, we're family. Um, but I mean, just the importance of connecting on a deeper level and sharing new things. Like funny, my mom has always my whole life been like, you should meditate, you should try yoga. And, you know, most of my life I've been like, I don't have
Yeah.
time for that.
Yeah, right.
Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's funny. I say if I told myself, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, whenever it was, that I'd be meditating and stuff, you know, that I would have laughed. And you know, it's something that we've been able to connect deeply over since I've been back. Is we can meditate together and we can share these moments of deep connection of things that are not only great for us, but really we really enjoy doing them. And to be able to do them together is even more important for me. You know, she paints with me now a lot too. I've recently moved up.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So good. Oh, you go ahead. I didn't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, you're right. I've recently moved up to Queensland to help care for my mum. My mum's got a fast progressing Alzheimer's. So my sister and her husband and kids are all up here, and I'm now up here with my partner, and we're close, and we're able to help out my dad with my mum more. And you know, having these moments of connection through painting or through meditation, or you know, no matter how far she declines, we can still have these shared moments, and they're really, really special moments that we have together. So
it's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
The thing I was going to say was I was just thinking when you were talking about with meditation, yoga, painting, and with your mom, and also that you are a huge advocate for art therapy. And I just was kind of curious if do you think that like maybe through art therapy people can achieve a mind state that's maybe similar just in some way to what people can experience with a psychedelic therapy? Is that I know that it's obviously
very different.
very
Yeah.
different.
I mean, possibly. I mean, you know, people who meditate for 20 years say that they can get into states similar to psychedelics or similar to the after effects of psychedelics. I've never been able to do that through meditation, but I know people can. So I don't, you know, I've never experienced the sort of similar outcome. Well, I mean, it brings my mind silence. That's why I love to paint, and that's why when I took my first art therapy class, I just haven't stopped since then. You know, it really it takes into account your emotion, how you're feeling at the time. Then you can then apply a color to that. You can apply a texture to that. You can apply, you know, and you can then you start painting or drawing or whatever. I mean, I'm now a fluid artist, so it's not all about sitting down and evaluating my emotions. You know, not every painting I do is art therapy, but I feel like there's art therapy in every painting that I do anyway. It brings me into a nice quiet space in my head. And it's a therapy that I'm just so blown away that other people can enjoy. You know, it's I can sell my therapeutic outcome now. You know, if I want to. If someone wants to buy a painting, like I did this, it helped me mentally, it helped me feel better, it helped express creativity, you know, it brought joy, and now someone actually is enjoying it and might want to purchase it as well. It's like, holy crap. Like, no other outcome of therapy really has that. You know, I could sit in exposure therapy for so long, and you know, there's nothing like that comes out of it. I've also found a bit of joy with microdosing and painting. I've done some microdosing with psilocybin, and that with my painting, it allows me to get into this flow that, you know, I've got a quite good flow with my artwork in general, but there are days where I just can't do what I want to do. And I either then go jump in the ice bath, or I might consider doing some microdosing again. The ice bath has been amazing for getting me mentally prepared for painting. Particularly harder paintings that I really want to focus on, or if they're commission pieces that have to be great. There's a lot of pressure around them. I'll go jump in my ice bath, and that immediately grounds me and calms me and centers me. It's funny, I did a little experiment with this. I did a really crap painting, and I was like, I'm gonna jump in the ice bath and do a painting directly after. Let's see the difference. The difference was phenomenal. Like, there was a big difference. I mean, before I had the ice bath, you know, I could see my hands sort of shaking a little bit when I was trying to paint, and that was entirely gone. I was focused, I was present in that moment with my painting, and the difference between post ice bath and before ice bath, you know, that alone is really cool to me. I'm really interested.
This is actually something I have to know some more about, because so like with you know, microdosing or taking mushrooms in any capacity, whatever, it's not something that anybody needs to convince me about, because I already know it's awesome. but the ice bath thing, this is actually, I know people have been doing it forever and ever and ever, but it just came to my attention. I know that I think maybe it's just gaining more popularity with people, like especially with, obviously it's been around with athletes forever.
Yeah.
But I've just been learning about it being something to also alleviate anxiety. And so the thing is, the last thing in the world I want to do is go get in a tub of ice. It's like, it sounds so uncomfortable and unpleasant. But can you describe, like, so how does this work? How could this possibly be a good thing? It sounds like you're just doing something torturous, but but I am open-minded, and I'd love to hear, how does the ice bath thing work? I mean, you said
everyone seems to have their own method with ice baths. And a lot of people get different outcomes out of it. I'll sit in there for about 2 minutes. And I just sort of focus on my breath work. I'm able to calm my stress response, I think, is sort of the main thing for me. Being able to get on top of that intense stress response that your body goes into when you're exposed to cold like that. You know, it's funny, my partner and I video our progress in that just for each other, you know, and you can see at the start for him, there's a good 20 seconds where he's like hyperventilating, you know, he's like, and it's like, we need to get control of those deep breaths, and as we progress, we're able to sit in there and immediately just get into our deep breath work. And
so wait, you stay in the ice bath long enough to do breath work?
Well, I stay in for around 2.5 minutes. So
whoa,
it's more just about
so much worse than I thought. I'm sorry. 2.5 minutes is like, it seems like an eternity in an ice bath. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't want to. I'm here to learn. I'm not here to interject anymore. I'm sorry.
It does sound like a long time. I mean, when I first started, I was doing 60 seconds, and it's a shock. It is. It's hard. It's 10 seconds in, you're like, has it been a minute yet? I'm sort of learning now, though, that the second when I realize that I don't feel the need to just race out of there anymore, that's probably when I'm okay to get out. And that seems to be around the 2.5 minute now for me. So, I mean, it can feel like a long time and it's hard, but if you just focus on your breath work and sort of, I think there's a little bit of sense of pride that you can feel in dominating your stress response, you know, especially with a history of trauma. My stress response has dictated so much of my life and so many of my actions and my behaviors, that being able to get on top of that with something as simple as an ice bath. I don't have to go to Peru and drink psychedelics for that. I can just jump in my ice bath at home, you know. It's an amazing thing. And I mean, I started off with 30 seconds of a cold shower at the end of my showers, you know, and that's a shock to the system after being in 38, 40 degree water, you know. I think it's a really good
I live in America. They don't teach us Celsius.
Yeah.
I don't know what any of those temperatures mean.
Either do I. In Fahrenheit.
Don't worry about it. I get it. Hot shower.
Yeah, like a hot spa or something, you know. But
Okay, so
going, you know,
so you're
going,
saying, so like, all right, so you didn't go straight to just dumping a ton of ice in a bathtub full of cold water. You started out, you just do a shower, and then at the end you go like, all right, now this shower is gonna suck for
yeah, 30
30
seconds.
seconds, and you just turn it freezing cold, and
Freezing
then
cold, full
and you just
ball.
get out. You just get out of, and then you're
Yeah.
okay. How
Yeah, and I mean,
how long would you suggest like going through that phase before you're like ready to do like the real deal?
um, I think I decided to venture in further with the ice baths after I was really noticing that 30 seconds of cold water. I was like, I'd get out of the shower and I'd be like, yes, like, what are we doing today? I'm
Yeah.
so pumped and I'm centered and I'm focused and I'm ready, you know, like, and I seem to do a lot of good thinking in the shower. I don't know if that resonates with anyone. I have a lot of my good thinking and good thought time happens a lot when I'm showering. So, when I have that last 30 seconds and I've had some like deep thoughts in the shower already, you know, I get
Yeah.
out and I'm pumped. And so I guess I just wanted to try the more extreme version of that and see if it did G me up even more, you know, or have different effects on me. And feeling pumped is something that I haven't experienced a lot in the past few years with having trauma and stuff to deal with. And
Yeah.
even just having that, it was like, holy shit, I'm alive again. Like this makes me feel alive. And not only that, I don't feel wired. You know, when you get all pumped up and you're too excited and you feel kind of wired and you're like, I could do anything right now. And I hope I don't hurt anyone, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's like I'm pumped, but I'm centered, I'm calm, and I'm focused and I'm sort of on top of what I'm experiencing, which is again something that's been rather foreign to me in the past. So I think it's got a lot to do with just sort of feeling in control. And I mean, a lot of having PTSD is trying to deal with feeling out of control and having no control over your reactions or nightmares, whatever it is. So being able to control some aspects of your life is it's a pretty big deal for people with trauma. Being able to control or feel calm and feel in control is just something I strive for, you know, because it has been so difficult and it can be so difficult to get there. So yeah, I feel really good after an ice
I
bath.
I am so glad that I met you, honestly, because I've been like kind of hemming and hawing and just thinking about this. This has been going on for weeks, maybe even a couple months since the last time. I can't remember. It's some athlete that I was following that was just like, this ice bath like has improved my performance, but also it's like if you've got anxiety, this really kicks it into gear too. And I was like, okay, cool. And then you know how it is, how the synchronicity with that is like you see this one video and then you hear
Yeah.
someone say something about it, then you hear someone else say about it,
Yeah.
and then you and I have this long conversation, very deep conversation about all these really major experiences, and I'm a believer.
You have to do
I'm
it now.
I'm I mean I'm not I'm 100% committed to doing this. I'm going to start, like you
Yes.
said, I'm going to start with the 30 minutes uh cold
30
shower.
seconds.
I mean 30, oh yeah, 30.
Yeah.
I
Oh
said
God.
30 minutes.
Don't freeze yourself to death.
Okay, that would be like fatal. I'm going to do the 30 seconds and then I'm going to build up to it and I'm going to do it, and I owe it to you, Holly. So thank you so
Yes.
much. And
Let me know how you go.
hell yeah. And hey man,
Love
hopefully
to.
I might even get a shot at going to Peru sometime, and I'll let you know how that goes too. But I got to tell you
Yes.
something, Holly. We are getting dangerously close to the lightning round.
Oh, we are.
So
Oh.
I have to tell you, it's literally just it's just a little bit of it's a little part of the podcast where I just ask questions extra fast. You
Okay.
but you're not supposed to think about it. You're just supposed to gut reaction, say the very first thing that comes into your mind. I think
Okay.
there's a couple things done here we might have actually already gotten into a little bit in this. I feel like we went all around the world on some of these things, so I feel
Yeah.
like we're primed up for all these questions.
Okay.
But if you're ready, I'm just going to get into the lightning round.
Ready.
Okay. First one. Do you have a favorite book on psychedelic research?
Oh, oh, like I should, but I don't. I mean, well, look, Dennis McKenna just released a new book. Paul Stamets just released a new book too recently. I mean, any content from Paul Stamets, Dennis McKenna, Graham Hancock, those sorts of guys in that
Yeah.
space is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, I literally forgot his first name. Stimmitz. What's his first name again?
Paul.
Paul. Yeah, I saw him
Yeah.
in the movie Fantastic Fungi. It's very,
Yeah, it's
very
brilliant.
cool. And then also I read a book by Michael Pollan called How to Change Your Mind. And
Yeah.
he's in that book extensively as well. So yeah, he definitely sounds like
Yeah.
he's a mycologist. So yeah,
Yeah.
I second that notion of checking out anything he's written recently. All right.
The
Sorry,
king of
this is a lightning
mushroom.
round. I'm going slow. It's me. It's always me. I'm always a slow one. All right. What is the longest you've worked on a piece of art without stopping? Meaning like not like how long did it take to finish, but how long did you
Hours.
go? Hours?
Definitely hours. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I get really
4 hours?
into probably 5 or 6. I sometimes get into these like hyper focus modes where I'm embellishing a painting with pens or really fine doodling on top of something. And I can sit there and it's like my house could be on fire and I wouldn't know, I'm just
Yeah.
hyper focus has happened. I'm in and that's what I'm doing. And yeah, I've definitely done that for nearly all day or all night before. Yeah, definitely.
Oh my God.
6 hours.
I hope these ice baths can hook me up with some of that too, because I can't come close to that. I think like 30
Uh,
minutes might be about the longest I can sit still. All right. Does art therapy include making music?
for me, no, I don't make music. I do look, I've done a lot of sound healing actually. So I mean, sometimes I'll sit with my crystal bowls and my Tibetan bowls and I'll play them first and then get into my painting. I do know a few artists who play guitar and sort of put their own music over their artwork on, online and stuff. But I've not combined the two really personally, I guess. So I mean, besides, little video clips and stuff that you make for content online, it's
Oh yeah.
I've never created music for
Mostly
my art. So,
mostly a visual medium.
yeah.
Um okay, I think we kind of touched on this a little, but still it is a different question. Do you think microdosing can be as useful as a traditional psychedelic experience?
Uh
I know that's a tough
no,
one. No, yeah.
no. And I mean, I only say that because I feel like with those, you're definitely hoping for two different outcomes, or you're definitely in those spaces for different reasons. Microdosing is not going to take you through or plunge you through into another realm where you can be visited by friends who have committed suicide or relived traumas like that. Microdosing is not that. That's not its intention either. Um, I can't compare the two in any way. I mean, you can sure both lessen anxiety a little bit, but I mean, it's microdosing is mostly sub-perceptual, so you shouldn't be having if you microdose and you're having visuals and stuff, it's generally you've taken too much.
Yeah.
It should be a small dose, and you shouldn't be able to really notice it, but there are little aspects of your life that you do notice change a little bit. I felt less anxious that day, or I felt more into the flow of my artwork that day, or whatever it might be. They are two very different things, and in my opinion, anyway. Yeah, very
Yeah.
different. There's no way I could paint during an ayahuasca ceremony. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
way.
I imagine not. Okay, last question, and it's kind of a tricky question, but I think it's worth just kind of putting it out there, like our various opinions on this. And for our respective governments, why do you think that psychedelic therapy is being blocked so harshly by the governments from keeping it out of mainstream medical usage, research, even with the mountains of evidence that are happening every day?
Sure. Well, I'm not sure if you've caught up lately with Australia, but we've recently rescheduled, and this is the thing, we've rescheduled psilocybin and MDMA to be used for treatment-resistant depression and treatment-resistant PTSD. Now, that took a lot of advocating. We've been advocating here for that for a long time. There is a charity organization called Mind Medicine Australia who have been advocating for that rescheduling for quite a long time. I'm obviously very connected with them. I'm one of their lived experience panel members, and I also help. I run the veterans and first responders chapter for Mind Medicine Australia with another veteran friend of mine. The way that it's gone is not what I would like to see, although I've been advocating for it. I believe everyone should be able to access like psilocybin and MDMA in therapeutic ways. I personally would like to see the decriminalization of nature in general. That's my core belief, is that we should be able to go out, and if I want to try mushrooms and have a mushroom ceremony, I should have the freedom and the legal freedom to explore my own conscious and to explore my own altered states and my own therapeutic altered states. So I mean, Australia has recently rescheduled psilocybin and MDMA for therapy. It's very tight. It's going to be very tightly controlled. It's also showing that it's going to be very expensive, which is going to be out of the realms for the people that need it the most, which is a big clash of how I feel about it all. Obviously, the people who need it most shouldn't have to pay $20,000 to get some mushrooms and sit down with a psychologist and psychiatrist for 8 hours. I don't care how many therapists you have in the room. It does not cost $20,000 to take someone through a few mushroom ceremonies. I don't believe that, and it's gonna hinder people accessing it. But your question, essentially, it's obviously the war on drugs from the start. It's there was a lot of promising research, especially Albert Hoffman, back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, when they were doing research with psychedelics, and it was proving to be a breakthrough industry. And obviously the war on drugs happened, and psychedelics and every drug, especially any plant-based drug, got obviously deemed to hell and said that they were just dangerous, and we've just been following that bullshit narrative since. It's especially in Australia, we're a middle power country. We're not a superpower country, and we rely heavily on the US for support, whether it's military or political support, and we're always going to be towing the line behind them. And we've always sort of looked up to them, as a country to look up to, and we've put in place the same sort of things. And I mean, everyone here, especially in the medical community, is shocked that the TGA rescheduled these two compounds recently. We've been advocating for like crazy for it, and they indicated that they were going to come out with the mid report saying this is definitely not going to happen, and it randomly got rescheduled. I think it had a lot to do with a visit from Professor David Nutt from the Imperial College in the UK, who's like the father of psychedelic policy and getting real drug information out. He lost his job in the UK for saying that alcohol was easily the most dangerous drug, and they fired him for that. So he came over and did the crazy crap. He came over and did a brilliant talk to the TGA and the government and ministers and health ministers and stuff, and it got rescheduled. So he has been very influential in that. But again, we're all in the same boat there because of this, the war on drugs and the bullshit narrative that's been fed around that. And all anyone has to do is look at the research that's coming out. It's undeniable. You cannot deny that psychedelics have a place in medicine anymore. You just can't. And I love that we're at that position. I really do. Yeah. It excites me,
there is hope.
Yeah. And especially when, I've got veterans and first responders coming to me, talking to me about this stuff. Like, I want to access it. I've tried everything, and it's like, I understand where you are, man. I understand what you're going through. And given it's still quite a few months off for, the rescheduling to take place. And there's a lot of barriers and red tape that psychiatrists have to go through and stuff before anyone can even consider getting it done. So I've still got people that are coming to me saying, I need help now. I can't wait 4 months for when this gets rescheduled or for when my psychiatrist might get approved to be using these medicines. I can't wait that. Yeah. So, I've helped veterans get overseas to Peru to very trusted families and Shipibo-owned plant medicine retreats, which I think is very important, that they are not owned. It's not to say that they shouldn't be owned by Americans or Australians, whatever it is, but knowing that there are indigenous Shipibo people running and owning their own center and being able to help them is so much more important for me. So, I've sent a few veterans and first responders. We've all had these big sort of circles where we can talk about preparation and we can talk about what we need to do to get there in terms of food, diet and getting off meds and that sort of stuff. And I mean, I'm purely there for the education side of it in terms of preparation. I'm not going to tell someone to get off any psychotics or any depressants. That's not my place. I'm not a doctor.
Yeah.
We just sort of talk them through that preparation stuff and knowing that they're going to a safe place and that they're going somewhere that has been personally recommended by a few people, including myself. It's a lot more comforting for them. I found myself helping book plane tickets with some of the guys because they struggle to even book a ticket online because their anxiety is just too much, and it gets overwhelming. And sometimes I'm on the phone 2 weeks, every single day in the lead up to them leaving. But just hearing, sort of being in touch with them when they return, and especially the partners of these people. I had a veteran return not too long ago, and he called me when he landed in Melbourne, and his wife was in the background, and she just screamed, he's a new man, he's a changed man. Like, I could just hear this happiness in her voice, and my heart just exploded. I just felt so happy for them, and I was just all these thoughts of, he's going to get to sit and hold his wife and kids feeling present now. He's not going to have this anxiety fueled stress body and mind, and he's going to be able to be present with his kids and his wife in these moments that, some of these guys have trauma from the 90s, that if not earlier, and it's like they've not been able to do that with their partners or their families or their kids, for so long. And knowing that we can assist them, I can even just help them get over there, is just so rewarding, just knowing that it's such a helpful therapy. It's scary and it's full on, but it can be really helpful. And to hear the wives or the partners, be able to say, like, he's completely changed, he's calm, I can sit calmly with him now. It's just, it brings tears to my eyes, and it brings me just so much joy. So I mean, I love being able to assist veterans and first responders, and really any civilian, to be able to get over and do the deep work in Peru. And I'm so proud of everyone that chooses that option as well. Like, you're choosing to heal the collective as well, and it's a beautiful thing. And
Yeah.
I'm just so humbled by it all. And yeah, it's so amazing. It's really amazing.
And like we said, mindset and physical setting are probably the two most important aspects of everything, and that's what you're helping these people find. So that's incredible.
Yeah, which can be hard.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Holly, I have just one last question to ask you, and it's the most important question of the day. Where can people find you, find your art? Just
Sure.
follow you, like all that, all anything you would like to share.
Yeah, cool. I mean, I've got an art page on Facebook and on Instagram. Instagram's where I do most of my art sort of stuff. The Instagram art community is very supportive and a very beautiful place to be compared to Facebook, in my opinion. So I mean, I've got my Facebook art profile is called Holly Jean Fluid Art, or you can check me out on Instagram at Psychedelic Intimacy, or Holly Jean Fluid Art as well. You can try both of those. Yeah, feel free to check out, and please connect. If anyone wants to talk plant medicine or ayahuasca or psychedelic therapy or art therapy or any of this, I'm so open to connecting with people. I love talking about this stuff. I love hearing people's healing stories. I love hearing from people, even if they don't have a healing story and they just want to chat about art therapy or psychedelics. I'm so open to it. So please, if anyone listening wants to talk any further about this stuff, like get in contact. I'd love to chat.
Also, yeah, guys, if you follow me, I will have Holly linked and everything, so it'll be super easy just to go through my thing. Click on her, and there she'll be. Holly, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. This has been fantastic.
It's been really fun. I really appreciate it, Doug. I'm very humbled by everything. And, I looked at all your previous guests and I was like, what am I doing on this? Like, why am I being invited to talk here? But I mean, it's a powerful story to share, and I mean, connection's the most important thing. So I'd love to connect with more people, and especially your viewers if they're interested. And with you again, I'd love to hear how your ice baths go. And if you ever want to go to Peru, let me know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You will hear about how the ice baths go. I will let you know as soon as I do it. You're gonna get a message from me.
That'd be great.
Thank you, Holly.
I look forward to it. Okay, cool. Thanks so much.